Some people grow up learning how to ride a bike. Some learn how to make friends. Some learn how to feel safe. And then there are children who learn something very different. They learn how to read a room. They
Thank
learn
you
how
for
to notice
watching
tension
and
before anyone says a
subscribing.
word. They learn how to tell the difference between a good day and a bad day just by listening to footsteps in the hallway. At the time, none of it feels unusual. It's just life. It's just what you do. But years later, something strange starts to happen. You realize you notice things other people miss. You can sense when someone isn't okay before they say anything. You stay calm during situations that overwhelm everyone else. You understand people in ways that are difficult to explain. And yet, for most of your life, you may have seen these traits as problems. Maybe people called you too sensitive, too serious, too observant, too independent. Maybe you even wished you could stop thinking so much, stop noticing so much, stop feeling so much. But what if those traits didn't appear by accident? What if they were shaped by experiences you had long before you understood what was happening? Psychologists have discovered that children who grow up navigating emotionally difficult environments often develop unusual strengths, not because struggle is good, and not because pain is something to celebrate, but because the human brain is remarkably adaptive. Sometimes it learns to survive, and in the process, it develops abilities that remain long after the struggle is gone. In this video, we'll explore 9 signs that your childhood struggles may have shaped a form of rare intelligence that most people never notice but often spend their entire lives trying to understand. The first sign is something many people think of as intuition, but it usually goes much deeper than that. You walk into a room and almost immediately sense the atmosphere. Something feels off. Someone seems uncomfortable. There's tension in the air, even though nobody has said anything yet. And somehow, you notice it before everyone else. For years, you may have assumed you were just overly sensitive. Maybe people even told you that. You're reading too much into things. You're overthinking. But often, that's not what's happening. Children who grow up in emotionally unpredictable environments learn very quickly that paying attention matters. They learn to watch facial expressions, changes in tone, silences, small shifts in mood, because those signals often carried important information. Information that helped them prepare, adapt, or avoid conflict. Over time, the brain becomes incredibly good at recognizing patterns. So good that the process becomes automatic. As an adult, you may call it a gut feeling.
Thank
But what
you
you're often
for watching
experiencing is
and
pattern recognition built
subscribing.
over many years. The strange part is that what once developed as a survival skill can later look like emotional intelligence. People come to you for advice. They feel understood around you. They wonder how you always seem to know what's going on beneath the surface. What they see as a gift may have started as a necessity. And that's the thing about rare intelligence. Sometimes it begins as adaptation long before it becomes ability. The second sign is something many people don't understand about you. Someone tells you they're okay, but somehow you know they're not. You notice it in the way they answer. The way their smile seems slightly forced. The way their energy feels different even when their words sound normal. And more often than not, you're right. For years, you may have thought you were just overly sensitive. Maybe you've even wondered why you pay attention to things that nobody else seems to notice. But this habit often starts much earlier than people realize. When a child grows up in an environment where emotions are unpredictable, the brain learns to pay close attention. Not because it wants to, because it has to. It learns that important information isn't always spoken out loud. Sometimes it's hidden in a look, a silence, a change in tone, As adults, those children often become incredibly good at reading people. They notice what's happening beneath the surface. That's why friends often come to them for advice. That's why they can sense when someone is hurting long before anyone else sees it. What looks like intuition is often years of emotional observation quietly turned into a skill. The third sign often confuses the people around you. When something goes wrong, they expect you to panic. But somehow, you don't. A crisis happens. Plans fall apart. People become emotional. The room fills with stress. And while everyone else seems overwhelmed, something inside you becomes quieter, more focused, more alert. You start thinking about what needs to happen next, what can be fixed, what matters right now. From the outside, it looks like confidence, like emotional control, like you're naturally good under pressure. But for many people, the story started much earlier than that. If you spent part of your childhood dealing with uncertainty, tension, or emotional instability, your nervous system learned something important. It learned how to function while stressed. It learned how to keep moving even when things felt uncomfortable. While other children were learning that life was mostly predictable, you may have been learning how to adapt when it wasn't. And adaptation leaves marks. Years later, when a difficult situation appears, your brain doesn't immediately see chaos. It sees something familiar, not enjoyable, not easy, just familiar. That's why many people with childhood struggles become the person everyone turns to during hard times. The
Thank you
person
for
who stays
watching
calm,
and so
the person who thinks
bye-bye.
clearly, the person who somehow knows what to do next. The irony is that others often admire this strength. What they don't see is how much experience it took to build it. Sometimes the ability to stay calm under pressure isn't a personality trait. It's a skill your nervous system practiced long before you knew it was learning. The fourth sign is something that often feels exhausting. You think about people more than most people do. A short conversation stays in your mind long after it's over. A strange reaction catches your attention. A small comment makes you wonder what was really meant. While other people move on, you're still trying to understand what happened beneath the surface. Why did they say that? What were they feeling? Was there something they weren't saying? For many people, this habit began in childhood. When life feels emotionally unpredictable, understanding people becomes important. You start paying attention. You watch patterns. You notice what happens before conflict, disappointment, or tension appears. Over time, your brain becomes trained to look beneath behavior instead of simply accepting it. Years later, the habit is still there. That's why you're often more interested in motives than words. You want to know what's driving someone's actions, what they're hiding, what they're afraid of, what they're not saying. People may call it overthinking. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's something else. A mind that learned early in life that understanding people wasn't just interesting. It was important. And once you learn to see beneath the surface, it's very hard to stop. The fifth sign is one that many people admire from a distance, but living with it isn't always as easy as it looks. You've probably heard things like, "You're so strong. You always figure things out. You never seem to need anyone." And on the surface, that's true. When a problem appears, you handle it. When life gets difficult, you keep moving. When something falls apart, you find a way forward. You've become the person others can rely on. The person who rarely asks for help. The person who somehow carries more than people realize. But here's the part most people don't see. For many individuals, this independence wasn't a choice. It was a lesson learned very early. Maybe there were moments when support wasn't available. Maybe you learned that depending on others often led to disappointment. Maybe you discovered that solving things yourself felt safer than hoping someone would show up. Little by little, your brain adapted. It stopped expecting rescue. It started expecting responsibility. And over time, self-reliance became part of your identity. The problem is that what protects us can sometimes isolate us. You become so used to carrying things alone that receiving help starts to feel uncomfortable. Even when support is right there, even when people genuinely care, you still hear that quiet voice saying, "It's okay, I'll handle it myself." And that's where this strength becomes complicated. Because independence is powerful, but connection matters too. If this sign feels familiar, leave a 5 in the comments below. I'm curious how many people learned to become strong because they felt they had no other option. Because sometimes the strongest people in the room aren't the ones who never needed help. They're the ones who learned how to keep going when help wasn't there. The 6th sign is often misunderstood, especially by people who have never experienced it themselves. You feel things deeply, sometimes deeper than you wish you did. A song can stay with you for hours. A kind gesture from a stranger can affect you all day. A harsh comment can echo in your mind long after everyone else has forgotten it. And when you see someone hurting, it's hard not to feel part of that pain yourself. For years, many people with this trait are told the same thing. You're too sensitive. You're taking it too personally. You need thicker skin. But what if sensitivity isn't the problem? What if awareness is? Children who grow up navigating difficult emotional environments often become highly responsive to what happens around them. Their brains learn to pay attention, not just to danger, but to emotion, to suffering, to changes in people, to things that others walk past without noticing. As adults, that awareness doesn't disappear. It simply expands. That's why beauty moves you deeply. Why injustice bothers you more than it seems to bother others. Why certain experiences stay with you longer. People may call it sensitivity, but sometimes sensitivity is just awareness without a filter. And while it can make life heavier at times, it can also make life richer. Because the people who feel deeply are often the same people who love deeply, care deeply, and understand others in ways that can't be taught. The 7th sign shows up most clearly in relationships. Not because you don't want close connections, but because trust takes time, sometimes a lot of time. When you meet someone new, you're usually polite, friendly, open enough to have a conversation. But deep down, a part of you is still watching, still paying attention, still gathering information. You don't automatically assume someone is trustworthy just because they seem nice. You want consistency. You want actions that match words. You want proof over time. And honestly, that can be frustrating, especially when other people seem able to trust so easily. For many people, this pattern started years ago. When you're young and experience disappointment often enough, your brain learns an important lesson. Not every promise is reliable. Not every safe-looking situation is actually safe. Not every person means what they say. So, instead of trusting quickly, you learn to verify, to observe, to wait. As an adult, that habit can make relationships harder to start, but it can also make them stronger once they form. Because when someone finally earns your trust, it usually means something. You don't give loyalty casually. You don't open up to everyone. And the people who make it past your walls often discover something rare. A level of honesty, commitment, and depth that is difficult to find. What some people call guardedness is often a heart that learned the value of trust the hard way. And that's why it protects it so carefully. The 8th sign is one that many people struggle to explain. Your life may be calmer now, safer, more stable, and yet relaxing still feels strangely difficult. You finally have a free evening. Nothing urgent needs your attention. No problem needs solving. No crisis is happening. But instead of relaxing, your mind keeps searching for something. Something you forgot. Something you should be doing. Something that might go wrong. Even when everything is okay, part of you stays alert. Waiting, watching, preparing. For people who grew up in stressful or emotionally unpredictable environments, this can become a deeply ingrained habit. When your nervous system spends years learning to stay vigilant, it doesn't automatically switch off when life improves. It keeps running the same program, just in case. That's why rest can sometimes feel uncomfortable. Not because you're lazy, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your body learned that staying alert was safer than letting go. The challenge is that what once protected you can eventually exhaust you. You carry tension into peaceful moments. You stay prepared for problems that never arrive. And over time, that becomes heavy. The good news is that awareness is the first step. Because once you understand what's happening, you stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking, why can't I just relax? And start asking a different question. What would it feel like to finally convince my nervous system that the danger has passed? For many people, that's where real healing begins. The ninth sign may be the deepest of them all. You have a hard time living on the surface. Small talk is fine for a few minutes, but sooner or later, your mind starts looking for something more. A deeper question, a deeper conversation, a deeper reason behind what is happening. You've probably spent a lot of your life wondering why people do what they do, why some experiences change us forever, why some people become bitter after hardship while others become wiser, why suffering exists at all. And if you've been through difficult things yourself, those questions often become even stronger, because pain has a way of forcing people to think about life differently. It pushes you to look beyond appearances, beyond status, beyond the things most people spend their lives chasing. Many people who struggle during childhood eventually develop a powerful need for meaning, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they don't want suffering to be meaningless. They want to understand what it taught them, how it shaped them, what can be learned from it. And over time, that search often creates something remarkable. Perspective, wisdom, a deeper appreciation for what truly matters. That's why many people with rare intelligence seem older than their years. Not because they've lived longer, but because they've spent more time wrestling with life's hardest questions. And sometimes, the people who search most deeply for meaning are the same people who emerge with the clearest understanding of what really matters. If you've recognized yourself in several of these signs, there's something important I want you to remember. None of these experiences mean your childhood struggles were good. And they certainly don't mean pain was necessary. Pain is still pain. Loss is still loss. Difficulty is still difficulty. But sometimes when we look back, we only see what those years took from us. We rarely stop to notice what they built. The awareness, the resilience, the ability to read people, the ability to adapt, the ability to keep moving forward when life becomes difficult. For a long time, you may have looked at these traits and thought they were flaws. Maybe you called yourself too sensitive, too cautious, too independent, too different. But what if some of those things were never flaws at all? What if they were signs of a mind that learned to grow under pressure? A mind that learned lessons earlier than it should have had to? Because the truth is, many people spend years believing something is wrong with them, when in reality, they're looking at survival skills and calling them weaknesses. So if there's one thing to take away from this video, let it be this. You are not defined by what happened to you. You are not defined by the struggles you faced. You are defined by what you built in response to them. If this video spoke to you, leave a 9 in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the things that made you feel different were never signs that you were broken. They were signs that you were becoming stronger than you realized.